After 10 years of marriage, my wife said, "You'll never be her true dad. Stop the act." So when they mocked me in the kitchen, quietly I packed my bags and left a note, "You're right." My wife looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll never be her real dad. Stop pretending." After 10 years of marriage, that one sentence didn't just hurt, it unlocked a chilling clarity that shattered my entire world. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee usually brought comfort. But this time, it was tainted by their laughter drifting up from the kitchen. My wife, Olivia, and my daughter, Chloe, giggling about how I'd just pay for everything anyway, because that's what I always do. That's when I knew I was done. I didn't yell. Didn't slam doors. No big, dramatic scene like you see in movies. I just quietly went upstairs, pulled up my old army duffel bags, and started packing my life into neat, organized piles. They kept giggling downstairs, completely oblivious. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, you need to understand how we got here, because this wasn't some overnight thing. This was a decade of me pouring everything into what I thought was real, while they, apparently, were just playing house with my wallet. I'm 38 now. I've been in construction since I was 19. My dad sat me down after I told him I wanted to skip college and said, "Son, you can either look rich or be rich. Most people waste their whole lives doing the first one." That stuck with me harder than any diploma ever could. I started as a framer, making $12 an hour. By 25, I was a foreman. By 32, I had my own small contracting company, doing renovations and custom builds in the suburbs of Phoenix. The work was brutal, 60 to 70-hour weeks, hands that never quite stopped aching. But I loved it. Every project was proof I could build something real, something that lasted, something that mattered. I saved every penny. Lived in a tiny apartment, cheaper than most car payments. Drove a 15-year-old truck that looked like garbage but ran like a tank. By 35, I had enough saved to buy this old craftsman house that needed serious work. I spent 9 months gutting it, rewiring, replumbing, refinishing every surface until it looked like something out of a magazine. I remember standing in that finished living room, thinking, this is it. This is what success feels like. Having a place that's truly yours. That's when I met Olivia at a neighbor's barbecue. She was 28. Had this warm smile, this way of talking that made you feel like you'd known her for years. And she had a 4-year-old daughter, Chloe, who was shy but sweet. Olivia told me that night, pretty casually considering how heavy it was, that Chloe's biological father had been what she called a mistake with legs. He vanished the day she told him she was pregnant and she hadn't heard a word since. I didn't think much of it, just figured she was another single mom doing her best. But we kept running into each other, and eventually, I asked her to dinner. Chloe came with us that first time. Olivia couldn't find a sitter. I remember this little girl ordering chicken fingers and asking me if I knew how to build tree houses because she'd always wanted one. Something about that question just got me. We started dating slowly. I never pushed to be involved with Chloe, knowing it was complicated territory. But Olivia brought her around more and more. Gradually, this kid who barely talked to me started asking when I was coming over again. I fixed things around Olivia's apartment, built Chloe that treehouse I'd promised, taught her how to use a level and a tape measure. Somewhere in there, she started calling me Dad without anyone telling her to. Just started doing it naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. After 2 years, Olivia and I got married in a small ceremony. 3 months later, I legally adopted Chloe. It felt like the right thing to do, making official what already felt true. I added her to my will, set up an education fund I contributed to monthly. Made sure she had health insurance through my company. I did everything a real father would do, because in my mind, that's exactly what I was. Life felt perfect for a while. Family dinners every night, weekend trips to the lake, birthday parties with way too much cake, all the normal stuff that makes you think you've built something solid. But then Chloe hit 13, and everything started shifting in ways I didn't recognize. Suddenly, she wanted concerts with friends I'd never met. A new iPhone every year. To stay out later than any 13-year-old should. And every single time I said no, Olivia would undermine me. It started small. I'd say no, and Olivia would whisper to Chloe that maybe they could work something out. Or I'd set a rule, and Olivia would roll her eyes, telling Chloe I was just being overprotective, like I was some uptight stranger instead of her father. The undermining got worse as Chloe got older. It turned into this pattern where I was always the bad guy, always unreasonable, always the one who just didn't understand teenage girls. When Chloe was 15, she wanted to go to some overnight music festival 3 hours away with friends. No parents, just a bunch of teenagers camping and doing God knows what. I said, absolutely not. Olivia pulled me aside, arms crossed, voice tight, telling me I was controlling, that Chloe wasn't a baby. But I held firm. 15-year-olds don't need to be at unsupervised festivals, period. That's when Chloe came downstairs, saw us arguing, and told her mom she knew I'd ruin it. And Olivia just nodded, like I was the villain in their story. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Nothing special about it. Chloe had just turned 17 and wanted to go to a 2-day party at a lake house 3 hours away, leaving in literally 3 hours. When I said no, because that's insane, no planning, no parent contacts, nothing, Olivia lost it. She stood in our bedroom doorway, face red, voice shaking, and said it, "You'll never be her real dad. Stop pretending." The room went silent. I didn't respond. Didn't argue. Didn't try to explain. I just walked past her, went down to my workshop in the garage, and sat there in the dark for 3 hours, just thinking. That night, I slept on the couch for the first time in our marriage. And weirdly, I slept better than I had in months. Like some weight I didn't know I was carrying had finally lifted. When I woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning, made my coffee, and heard them both laughing in the kitchen about how I'd just keep paying for everything anyway, because that's what dads do, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was done pretending to. I stood there in the kitchen doorway, watching them laugh. Olivia with her coffee mug, Chloe scrolling through her phone. Both completely relaxed, like nothing had happened. I realized they didn't even remember I was in the house. Chloe said something I couldn't quite hear, and Olivia snorted, then said something back that made Chloe laugh harder. I caught just enough to hear her say, "He'll get over it like he always does." That's when the last tiny piece of whatever was holding me there just dissolved. I went upstairs, pulled out those duffel bags, and started packing with this weird, mechanical efficiency. Folding clothes, grabbing toiletries, leaving behind anything that was a gift from them or had their faces in it. The whole time, my hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. I packed my laptop, my work files, my tools from the garage, my grandfather's watch, the things that were mine before they were ours. I left everything else exactly where it was. None of it mattered anymore. I called my realtor, Ben, from the truck, a guy I'd worked with on several projects. I told him I needed the house listed today. Not next week, not tomorrow. Today. There was this pause. I could tell he wanted to ask questions, but something in my voice made him just say yes. Then I called my lawyer, Sarah, who'd handled my business contracts for years. I told her I needed to file for divorce immediately, and I needed her to handle it aggressively, but clean. She didn't waste time with sympathy or questions, just said she'd have papers ready by tomorrow morning. I drove to my bank, walked in at 9:15 right when they opened, transferred everything from our joint account into a new personal account, except for exactly half plus 1 month of their average expenses. I wasn't going to be petty, but I also wasn't going to be a fool. The house sale listing went live at 2 p.m. that same day. Professional photos Ben had taken 6 months earlier when I'd been thinking about maybe upgrading. The price was fair, maybe even slightly under market, because I wanted it gone fast. I left a note on the kitchen counter, short and simple, "You're right. I'm not her real dad, and you're not my real family." And I left my house keys right next to it. My garage door opener. The spare car key to Olivia's SUV that I'd been making payments on for 3 years. My phone started ringing around noon. Olivia's name lit up the screen over and over. Then Chloe's number. Then Olivia's mom, then her sister. I let every single one go to voicemail. I finally listened to them that evening, sitting in a hotel room that smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. Olivia's voice went from confused to angry to desperate across 7 messages. Demanding to know where I was, what I was doing. How dare I list the house without telling her? How could I abandon Chloe like this after everything? Her mother left a message that was just pure venom, calling me selfish, cruel, saying I was destroying a child's life over a simple argument. I deleted it halfway through. I'd heard enough of that family's version of reality to last me a lifetime. Chloe's message was different. Shorter. Younger. Asking what was going on. Asking if I'd really left. And she called me Dad in that message, which almost cracked something in me. But then I remembered her laughing in the kitchen. Remembered her saying, he just pays for everything anyway. And that crack sealed right back up. I blocked all their numbers that night. Blocked Olivia's parents. Blocked her sister. Blocked everyone connected to that chapter of my life. The silence that followed was the most peaceful thing I'd experienced in years. Sarah called me 3 days later with an update that made me actually smile. Apparently, Olivia had hired a lawyer, some guy who'd send over this aggressive letter demanding I return ownership of the house, pay for Olivia's living expenses during the divorce, compensate her for emotional distress, and maintain all of Chloe's expenses, including her college fund. Sarah's response letter was apparently so thorough, so devastating in its point-by-point destruction of every claim, that Olivia's lawyer called her directly to say his client might want to reconsider her approach. Sarah's letter pointed out that the house was mine before the marriage, that I'd already left Olivia more than required by law, that Chloe was legally adopted, but that didn't obligate me to fund her lifestyle indefinitely. And that if Olivia wanted to push this into court, we could discuss the affair she'd been having with her personal trainer for the past several months. I was absolutely blindsided. I had no idea about any affair. But Sarah had done her due diligence, hiring a private investigator as standard procedure, and he found it in about 48 hours. Apparently, it was well documented with texts and hotel receipts. Suddenly, Olivia's lawyer went very quiet. The house sold in 8 days. A young couple with a baby on the way loved everything about it, and they paid $20,000 over asking because 2 other buyers got into a bidding war. I signed the papers, watched the money hit my account, and felt absolutely nothing except maybe relief that it was done. Olivia tried to reach me through mutual friends, through my business partner, through a cousin I barely talked to, always with the same message: we needed to talk, she'd made a mistake, Chloe was devastated. But I didn't respond to any of it. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks after I moved out, Chloe sent me an email, not a text, because I'd blocked her number. It was a list of things she needed, and I mean needed in italics and underlined, like it was some kind of invoice. She needed her phone bill paid. Needed car insurance for the car she was about to get. Needed her college fund accessible for expenses, which we both knew meant whatever she wanted. Needed money for yoga classes. Needed a new laptop for school. I read through this list twice, this itemized breakdown of how much I was apparently still obligated to provide. I wrote back one sentence, cold and sharp: I'm not your real dad, remember? Then, silence. For a long, long time. The weirdest part of all this happened about a month after I left. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize and almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. This voice introduced himself as Ryan, Chloe's biological father, saying he'd heard through Olivia that I'd left and he just wanted to talk. Apparently, Olivia had tracked him down through Facebook in a desperate attempt to find anyone who might help pay for Chloe's expenses. She sent him this long message about how I'd abandoned them, and how Chloe needed her real father now. Ryan, being Ryan, ignored most of it but was curious enough to reach out to me. We ended up meeting for coffee. This guy who'd been a ghost for 13 years suddenly appearing like some kind of cosmic joke. He told me Olivia had been blowing up his phone asking for money, asking if he could start contributing to Chloe's life now that I was gone. He told her absolutely not, because he didn't even know the kid. Ryan looked at me across the coffee shop table. He was probably 40, looked older. Had this worn-down quality, like life had beaten him up pretty good. He said he'd been a real piece of garbage back when Olivia got pregnant, and he owned that completely. But at least he'd never pretended to be something he wasn't. And what they did to me was lower than anything he'd ever done. He told me he'd actually looked me up before calling, found out about my business, saw that I'd been a real father to Chloe for over a decade. He couldn't believe they'd thrown that away over what amounted to teenage entitlement and Olivia's need to always be the good guy. I asked him why he really called me, what he wanted out of this conversation. He just shrugged. And said he figured I deserved to know I wasn't crazy. That from the outside looking in, it was obvious Olivia had used me, and Chloe had learned to do the same. Sometimes you need to hear that from someone who has no reason to take your side. He paid for both coffees, shook my hand, told me to take care of myself. That was the last time I ever saw or heard from him. The divorce was finalized 3 months after I left, clean and quick, because Sarah's lawyer had advised her to take the settlement and walk away. Just like that, 10 years of my life became a stack of papers in a filing cabinet. I moved into a smaller place closer to my work sites. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No shared memories attached to the walls, no photos I had to take down, just empty space I could fill however I wanted. Work became my focus again, like it had been before. I took on bigger projects, hired 2 more guys, and my business grew faster in 6 months than it had in the previous 3 years. Probably because I wasn't rushing home for family dinners that always ended in arguments about money or Chloe's latest demand. About 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from my biggest client. He owned a chain of restaurants and had hired me for renovations on 3 locations. He sounded uncomfortable, which immediately put me on alert. He told me Olivia had somehow gotten his number. She'd called him pretending to be concerned about my well-being. Told him some story about me being unstable, about how I'd abandoned my family without warning over nothing, about how he might want to reconsider working with someone so unreliable. I felt my jaw clench. Felt that old anger starting to surface. But before I could say anything, my client laughed and said he'd told Olivia that in 15 years of business, he'd never met anyone more reliable or professional than me. That whatever happened in my personal life was none of his concern. And that if she called again, he'd consider it harassment and contact the police. He just wanted to give me a heads up in case she tried this with other clients. I thanked him, hung up, and realized Olivia was spiraling in ways I hadn't anticipated. I heard through mutual friends, the few who still talked to me, that Olivia and Chloe had moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. That Olivia was working night shifts at a chain diner because her communications degree hadn't exactly translated into career opportunities. And that Chloe had taken a job at a burger place because the college fund I'd set up was locked and she couldn't access it anymore. Part of me felt bad hearing this. Felt that old instinct to fix things, to step in and help like I'd always done. But then I remembered that kitchen. Remembered that laugh. Remembered being told I'd never be her real dad. And that instinct died before it could take root. Life moved on in that weird way it does after major changes. I started dating again, casually. Nothing serious, just dinners and movies with women who didn't have complicated family situations or teenagers who needed funding. I bought a new truck. Took a weekend trip to the mountains. Started going to the gym in the mornings. Did all the things I'd wanted to do for years, but never had time for because I was always working to pay for someone else's life. About 8 months after the divorce, I ran into Olivia at a grocery store. Literally turned down the cereal aisle, and there she was, looking tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing scrubs that suggested she'd just come from or was heading to one of her shifts. We made eye contact. She froze, opened her mouth like she was going to say something, and I just nodded once and kept walking. Grabbed my cereal and headed to the checkout without looking back. I didn't feel angry seeing her. Didn't feel sad. Didn't feel much of anything, really. And that absence of feeling was somehow more final than any argument could have been. Then, about a year after I left, almost exactly to the day, I got an email from Chloe. Not a demand this time, not a list of things she needed, just a message that started with an apology. She said she'd been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about how she'd treated me, about how her mom had treated me, and she was genuinely sorry. She said her mom had started dating some personal trainer named Ethan about 4 months after I left. And watching Olivia try to manipulate him the same way she'd probably manipulated me had been eye-opening. Chloe wrote that Ethan had seemed like a decent guy at first, had helped with some bills, had been patient with Chloe's attitude. But then Olivia had opened a credit card in his name without telling him, and he'd found out when the collections calls started. Ethan apparently confronted Olivia, did his own digging, somehow got in touch with Ryan through social media, and Ryan told him everything. Told him about our coffee meeting. Told him to run before Olivia destroyed his credit and his sanity like she tried to do to everyone else. Chloe said watching Ethan pack his stuff and leave while her mom cried and made excuses felt like watching a replay of what I must have gone through, except I'd stuck around for 10 years before finally having enough. She wrote that she understood if I never wanted to talk to her again, that she didn't deserve my forgiveness or my time, but she needed me to know that I'd been the only real dad she'd ever had, even if she'd been too stupid and selfish to appreciate it when it mattered. I read that email 3 times, sitting in my truck after a long day on a job site, hands still dusty from drywall work. I felt something crack a little. Felt some of that old affection for the little girl who used to hand me tools in the workshop and ask a million questions about how things worked. But I also knew that girl was gone. Had been gone for years, probably replaced by someone who'd laughed at me in a kitchen and sent me an itemized list of demands like I was an ATM with a pulse. I wrote back after thinking about it for 2 days. Kept it short. Told her I appreciated the apology and that I hoped she learned something valuable from all this, that I genuinely wished her a good life. And that was all I needed to say. I didn't offer to meet up. Didn't offer to rebuild anything. Didn't ask how she was doing or leave the door open for future contact, because some chapters close cleanly, and this needed to be one of them. 3 days later, I deleted that email thread, blocked her address just to remove the temptation of checking for replies, and went back to the life I was building, the one that was actually mine this time. I saw Olivia one final time after that, about 14 months after I'd originally left. She was walking out of that same grocery store, looking even more worn down than before, and she saw me getting out of my new truck and just stopped dead in her tracks. She stood there staring like she was seeing a ghost. And I looked back at her. This woman I'd spent a decade with. This woman I'd built a life around and worked myself into the ground for. And I felt nothing but a distant curiosity about who I'd been back then. About why I'd stayed as long as I did. About what I thought I was proving. I nodded to her the same way I'd nod to any stranger. Got back in my truck and drove to the house I'd bought 3 months earlier. Smaller than the old one, but paid for in cash. Sat on my back deck that didn't have anyone else's stuff cluttering it up and realized I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy for the first time in longer than I could remember. Some chapters of your life close with explosions and screaming matches and dramatic confrontations. And some close with a quiet click, like a door shutting softly in an empty house. This one had been the second kind. Final and complete. Exactly what I needed it to be. What would you have done in my shoes?